Not gonna let nothing turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking. I'm gonna keep on talking, following up freedom red. So this event is that process of us coming together to march together and walk up a particular way. So I am Reverend Germaine Green, and I bid you greetings from Unity Fellowship of Christ Church, New York City. So I'm going to jump right into this. The scripture has already been read. So my title for this evening is A Fierce Urgency Now, ... again. Every now and then, when we look at how life is taking us, sometimes we got to come back to it again. So point number one is fierce urgency of now, segregation, and voting. So there were some key pieces of who MLK was, that he dedicated his life to ensure that that generation and generations to come would not have to endure particular types of oppression, irregardless of who they were. So if we look at that particular time, we find some things. So before we get to, I like to define words because I'm not due to us to be on the same page. So fierce, showing a heartfelt and powerful intensity. Fierce, urgency, now, ... again. Urgency, important, requires swift action. Something that's heartfelt, that has a powerful intensity, that moves us to have swift action now, at the present time or moment. Not tomorrow, not yesterday, but right now in this moment. And again, in addition to what has already been mentioned. So when we look back, there were particular things that he martyred, he advocated for, he lended his voice to. So the first thing was segregation. So at that time, segregation was rampant. Public buses, MLK began to stand up and do advocacy for, that led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This allowed banning of segregation in public places and employment discrimination on the basis of race and national origin. Many believe that it could have gone further, because when we look at schools at that time, in 1988, there were 44% of black students who attended a majority of white schools nationally, not just in New York, across this whole country. That hasn't necessarily changed today, because we have now segregation based on economic means. That some schools get better books than other schools get. Some schools have after-school programs and music programs while others do not. Some are placed in neighborhoods with resources that have been stifled because of who they are, who they identify as, and the intersectionality of their identities. When it comes to voting, many people way back then had to travel miles and miles and miles to vote. I think that happens now. When they changed the voting stations where you're supposed to go, and now you have to travel further out of your place. Urgency, fierce urgency of now, again. This is something that was not just MLK's heart passion. It was something that started the civil rights movement and invigorated it for us to continue to do the work again. And again does not mean that somehow what they did was not sufficient. It does not mean that somehow they failed at the task at hand. But what it means is that we have the opportunity to engage in this powerful work to shift the atmosphere, to shift the country that we live in, to allow it to be a space where we have the pursuit of happiness if we're black. We have the pursuit of happiness if we are differently able. We have the pursuit of happiness if we are a person of trans experience. We have the pursuit of happiness if all of that stuff comes together in a fruit salad and we are intertwined in all of our identities. There's still this opportunity that we are to be seen as human. A fierce urgency of now, again. As we see in our country, as election time is coming up, voting restrictions have been in place. There are 322 bills that went through last year alone to restrict our ability to vote, as if we didn't matter. Taking away our ability to go to drop boxes of third parties and removing them altogether. So now our elders and our family members cannot just leave their homes and go drop off their mail-in ballots. They're now having this whole process in reference to limiting how long early voting can happen for. Because some people work jobs. They work 2 jobs. Some folks work 3 jobs. Plus they take care of their ailing parents or ailing partners or someone that they are a caregiver to. And they may not have the ability to go during a 9 to 5 to go pass their ballot. Again, the disenfranchised communities are having their voice removed because early voter registration is a week. At one time it was 2. And somehow it's keep getting reduced and reduced and reduced. Because if we don't let them vote, then they have no power. But I want us to understand for this moment that our power doesn't just lie in our ability to vote. It allows in our ability to come together to allow God to move through us, that we move fear out of our beings and allow love and compassion to come through so that we're guided by wisdom to do amazing things. And what's the wisdom that we get to do? We get to come together to have voting registration drives, to ensure that people are able to use their voice in that ballot, that their voice is not removed. We get to allow people to, even if it is that we go and take people to where they have to go to drop off their ballots, it's us engaging in this humanitarian work of life, of stability, of this understanding, of fierce urgency, of now again. That none of our siblings get to go with their voice being stripped away any longer because we will now show up in a way that we stand in the gap. I think church folks call it intercessory prayer. But then if we go to the fact that beyond intercessory prayer is our opportunity to look out for those who we know may live further than where they vote and maybe pay for their Uber. There's opportunities of ways that we can do this so that no one is left out because they realize at a time during the midterm elections with early voter opportunities and the mailing ballots, all those disenfranchised communities, their voting spiked. So there's something when we have the access to something, we engage it. It's not about the knowledge of it. We understand the blood that was shed on Bloody Sunday that gives us the ability to voice our opinions toward an individual that is aligned with our thoughts. Point number 2. A fierce urgency of now, housing and poverty. At one time, they could not give you housing because you were black, because you was a woman, because you were gay, because you were differently able. They were able to do that. MLK thought that was injustice. So he began to ensure that folks were able to have access to good housing. But now we find ourselves again in a space where the ability to live in New York, folks are being priced out. Fierce urgency now again. That we get to lend our voices to a journey of ensuring that everyone has access to affordable housing. Because housing is truly a human right. MLK believed that. So we now have an opportunity to then, in this urgency of now, this importance of now, to make swift movement, not tomorrow, but now, to come together to change this process, lobby to our politicians, share information amongst our spaces of worship. So then they see the power of us coming together to lend our voices to the call of the day, that affordable housing is a human right and everyone deserves the right. as well as those who live under the poverty line. We get to then aid them in finding means. What do you mean, Rev? Possibly food pantries, sharing information that does not just have silos of our houses of worship, but connects us across the city, that people can know where to go, how to go, and what time to be there to get what is necessary, as they say, to make $1 out of 15 cents. Because their money has got slightly funny, but it is a fierce urgency of now again. This just did not start in 2024 or the last election. This is a continual process of how folks are finding ways to disenfranchise and disempower us as humans. So is it a fierce urgency of now? Absolutely. It was a fierce urgency of now on Bloody Sunday. It was a fierce urgency when MLK was assassinated. It's still a fierce moment of urgency now in 2024. Still, regardless of who's in power, it's still an opportunity for us to raise our voices to ensure that everyone is heard, everyone is accounted for, everyone is seen as human. Because we're the folks that are supposed to love folks. Not in spite of, but because of. So this becomes our opportunity in the now to act swiftly to do a different thing. To hold politicians accountable for what they claim they're going to do on the campaign trails to when they get elected. How many of us have known politicians to say all the nice things, all of the colorful things, just to get our vote? They call it pandering. They pander to us for us to then see them and then vote for them. Now we get to do the other piece of the urgency. Because the text begins to pan out the fact that we see all this inequity, we see all this violence, we see all of this hurt and pain. What are we then to do with it? We are to act. Not as a sole individual, but as a collective. That is the power of us coming together every year for this MLK celebrations. We get to come together to pull our forces, pull our energy, pull our awareness so that others know that it stops here. You don't get to erase us. But then it becomes the extra piece that we get to do this beyond just this day. To allow the communication to continue, to allow our ability to advocate to continue so that everything that happens within New York doesn't happen anywhere else. Because it was an amazing quote that I found that says, every end of the day is the most important time of the day. Because you are confronted with your past and you obtain a chance for tomorrow not to repeat your past mistakes. We get to, at this night, to make a choice to be confronted with all of the injustices that we see in our respective spaces and collectively. To now make new, wise choices going forward that we don't have to repeat what was done before. That we don't have to see young folks committing suicide. We no longer have to see folks doing strange things for some change. We get to then show up as guards, watching from the tower, coming down out the tower and serving people. Because that was the second chapter where they spoke about standing guard. Are we ready to stand guard for those who have been voiceless? The fierce urgency now, again. MLK did it. Malcolm X did it. Multiple civil rights folks did it. Marsha P. did it. So are we now ready with the courage and the tenacity to stand up to let our voices be heard? Are we ready to stand up and be a guard for the changing tide that someone will know that they matter and that their vote matters? Are we willing to collectively come together to come out of our towers and stand together? Are we willing to create the vision, write it, and make it plain? So it says tablet. So if you have a tablet, a cell phone, an iPhone, an Android, or a notebook, let's make that vision plain of how we see the future. If we see the future where there's justice for all, then let's write that vision and begin to collectively come together to work those steps out. If we see a world where there is equity and equal pay for all of our siblings, regardless of their gender expression, then we get to write the vision and make it plain. We get to do this from a place that allows us to understand that we come as one. One meaning one voice, one understanding, no longer separate in our separate towers, but together as a unified thing. The amazing part is sometimes we don't have to run the race to see the vision completed. But can we be strong enough to then empower others to pick it up and run? So that they can fulfill the process. Not to say that we are dissolved of responsibility. There's still work to be done. Because we want to see the vision manifested at its ordained time. That doesn't mean we get to wait and chill and have 5 seats back and wait for God to do something. It's a fierce urgency of now. That means we get to get up and work through this thing. Figure it out. Yes, there may have been some this, that, and the other. Some humanistic things have happened in the past and allowed us to run to our towers like Rapunzel. But I dare you to sit there and come down out that tower and then engage. Re-engage. And build something that will shake New York apart. Shake them apart because they've never seen love like this before. That was a song back in the days. Never seen love like this before. That will be the moment that we are understanding and operating in our fierce urgency of now again. And we may not have to ever do it again. Because we've accomplished the task and the goals now. Let us come together because again, the most important time is at the end of the day where we get to reflect and be confronted by our past. Let's reflect on the fact of what injustices have happened. Let's reflect on the fact of those who have been erased. Let's reflect on the fact of those who have had their lives snuffed out. Let's reflect on the fact of laws that have been created to stifle and restrict us from being the full humans that we are. And then let's make plans and strategies to ensure that doesn't happen again. So we never have to come back to a point where we're like, we're back here again. The next generation won't have to look back and be like, yo, they do what you were supposed to do. Now it's on us. We get to do it together. Because there's a fierce urgency of now. Again, we are part of this dream. We are the continuation of what MLK started, what Malcolm X started, what Rosa Parks started, what Medgar Evers started. We are the continuation of Sylvia Rivera. We are the continuation of Marsha P. We are the continuation of that to ensure that everyone is seen as human, as whole, as valid, and no longer erasable, no longer expendable, no longer war-torn. That we get to stand with love to ensure that all are heard and seen and never destroyed. Thank you.
Amen.